Tellico Village is a planned community located in Loudoun and Monroe Counties, Tennessee. It's a desirable, thriving community with high-quality amenities and services. The village is overseen by the Property Owners Association, Inc., POA, which is a nonprofit organization governed by a volunteer elected board of directors. The day-to-day management is vested in the POA Chief Executive Officer and staff. The POA board and staff are supported by a very active and knowledgeable committee infrastructure. Tellico Village Network is producing a series of videos on the various committees and the dedicated volunteers serving on them. This is Annette Schmidt, and I am here today in the Tellico Village Network studio with Phil Brenner, who is the chair of the Tellico Village Long Range Planning Advisory Committee. And Phil is going to talk to us today about some recent updates and accomplishments with the Long Range Plan. Welcome, Phil.
Hi there, Annette. Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. And we do want to talk about all of these accomplishments and updates. So what can you tell us?
Let me give you a little background first, Annette. So in 2019, the Long Range Planning Advisory Committee presented and the Board of Directors adopted a major rewrite of the Long Range Strategic Plan. It was the first update since 2010. And when we did that plan back in 2019, one of the recommendations that we made was, let's not wait 10 years to update it. Let's periodically take a look at it and see what updates are needed. So that's what we've been working on.
So it has been updated?
So yes, we have. We just completed a recent update. Each year we work with the Board of Directors and we agree on a set of goals. And so one of our goals from 2022 was to update the Long Range Plan. That goal carried over into 2023, and in February we presented the update at the February board meeting with the Board of Directors.
Why don't we start with the 2019 plan, and then you can tell us the progress.
Sure. So the 2019 plan was nearly 50 pages long, and it included topics such as infrastructure, restaurants, technology, parking, meeting rooms, golf, waterfront, the wellness center, pickleball, tennis, and more.
So what were some of the specific recommendations then that came out of that?
So that plan included 30 specific recommendations. And so in updating the plan this time around, the first place we started was to look at those recommendations and see where we were at and what needed to be updated.
And how are we doing?
So we're doing pretty well, actually, Annette. You know, we're just about 3 years into a plan that has a 20-year time horizon. And out of those 30 recommendations, 13 of them have been acted on, are either completed or in some stage of in progress.
Well, good. We're making progress.
Yep.
What would some of those examples be of where we have made progress?
Sure. So if you look at the summary on the screen we presented to the board, you'll see some of the things that we, from that plan that we've updated. So for example, a meeting room scheduling system, virtual meeting capabilities. We completed a Tellico Village census and survey. We're moving toward 10-year budget planning. We've had an increased focus on aesthetics and environment here in the village. We've been doing road resurfacing in the village, and we've had a pickleball expansion. So those are some of the things, recommendations from that plan that have either been implemented or are underway right now.
Well, with that kind of progress, why do you need to update the plan?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So, you know, the plan has a very long time horizon. It's 20 years out, right? And there are a lot of things that have changed since that plan was adopted in 2019. So some of the things that I think are important milestones is that we completed the Toqua Clubhouse and the Kahidi Community Center. We bought out CCI and acquired some land as well as the developer rights from CCI. Of course, we had the Tenacity Clubhouse fire, and that's something that no plan could have anticipated. We've had unprecedented building growth. We've had an increased focus on aesthetics and environment, and now that we have new land, there's an increased focus on land use planning. And the 2019 plan said that we need to begin to think about the transition from a build and enhance phase of the village to a maintain and sustain phase of the village. And we're essentially complete with that transition in that we're at a point in the village where we're not going to be building a whole lot more. We're going to be focusing on maintaining and sustaining the things that we have.
You're not kidding when you say that a lot of things have changed since the 2019 plan. But what are some of the inputs that you have been using when you look to update?
Sure. So you might recall, Annette, that in 2021, the Long Range Planning Advisory Committee conducted a village-wide survey, and we collected demographic data and opinions from villagers. We also built an updated housing forecast because the housing market took off, and we realized our models needed to be updated in terms of what's the future forecast for how fast we're going to be building. Some of the other inputs that we looked at was the 2022 reserve study that was done last year. There's a pretty extensive water system and hydraulic modeling and master plan that was done by Jacobs Engineering for the water and sewer system here in the village. And then finally, the POA marketing department did a study of what future retirees are looking for. And we wanted to make sure that we had our eyes on, do we have the right things for the next wave of people that are going to be retiring?
And that brings me to the question, what's the outcome of all that work? Your team has been working so hard, lots of data. What's the outcome of all that?
So we developed a 20-page report and a corresponding PowerPoint presentation. We looked at the 2019 report and what it said and what all of these changes might mean to the recommendations that were in there, if anything has changed and what updates we needed to make. And so as a result of all of that, we came forth with 17 new recommendations.
And what were those recommendations?
Right, so,
you knew I would ask.
Yes, I did. And so let me say that those recommendations were organized around the same topic areas that were in the 2019 plan. The first area was the topic of sustainability of the village. So in the area of sustainability, one of our recommendations was that Tellico Village must develop a master land use plan, particularly for the newly acquired CCI properties. The POA owns something on the order of 400 acres here in the village, and so we need to have a plan for what do we think is the anticipated use for that land. We also recommended in this area that the Tellico Village should strategically assess buying adjacent land for defensive purposes, as well as potential expansion or revenue opportunities. And I should caveat that, you know, the committee's not recommending that we run out and buy adjacent property, but we certainly need to have our radar up, saying what's going on around us, and is there an opportunity or is there a situation where we need to act either to protect ourselves or to take an advantage of an opportunity out there. In terms of amenities, our recommendations were that the Tenasseee Clubhouse, the rebuild that we're working on right now, must address meeting and dining space as well as kitchen space, as well as having ample parking. And we all know that parking at Tenasseee was a problem with the old facility there. We've also recommended that our committee should work in the next year or two on updating a benchmarking study. So we did a benchmark several years ago where we compared Tellico Village to other retirement communities to see how we stacked up. That benchmark is old now, and we need to take a look at updating that. In the area of infrastructure, Annette, we identified some needs. The first one was to consider the installation of sidewalks. This was one of the things that came directly out of the surveys that we did in 2021, that people talked about there's not enough places for walking in the village. Now, sidewalks are a big deal and would take a lot of work. I'm not sure how practical that recommendation is, but we wanted to get it in there. There may be situations where we can do that. We recommended development of high-speed internet capabilities in the village. And also we recommended that we consider a IT or technology advisory committee. And then finally, in the area of infrastructure, we said let's consider offering satellite office services. We have, one of the things that the survey revealed is that we have quite a few people in the village who work from home and sometimes have needs for office space, meeting rooms, copiers, things like that. So there may or may not be an opportunity to provide those kinds of services for a fee.
That's very interesting, Phil, that you're thinking so far ahead on your list. What's next on the list?
In the realm of demographics, Annette, we recommended that the village should strive to collect better data and demographic about our residents, especially capturing an email address for every property owner. you might be surprised to know that we don't have an email record, email address of record for all of our property owners. So as you can imagine, when it becomes necessary for the POA to contact every property owner, the only way we can do that is via snail mail, and that's expensive and time consuming. The other recommendation that we made in the area of demographics, and this again came out of the survey that we did, was that we should take a look at some of this property that we acquired from CCI and see if some of that can be developed for townhomes or villas, condos. One of the things that we found in the survey is that as residents age in Tellico Village, they frequently want to downsize, and they would very much like to stay in the village. And we looked and we concluded that we might not have the right inventory of the right size of homes for, you know, somebody that moved here years ago and bought a 3,000 square foot house on the lake and now wants to stay in the village but needs to downsize. You know, do we have the right places for them to move? Social fabric is really important to the village, and that was a topic area of the 2019 plan. And so one of the things that we recommended is that the future of the village, that our culture is so important to the dynamic of the village. And so we recommended that new villagers or HOA or other groups should work to identify and instill our culture into future residents. And I would say particularly the culture of volunteerism. I'll talk about that maybe a little later today. And then we also put in a recommendation. All of our board meetings and our committee meetings are during the day. And while we're primarily a retirement community, we do have people that work in the village. And so one of the suggestions we made was it might be advisable for the board and or committees to at least occasionally have meetings in the evening or at other times when those folks could have the ability to attend those. In the area of aesthetics and environment, we recommended that the village continue to work to preserve and protect our aesthetics, including, you know, green space and parks and trails. And that's a good segue finally into the topic of parks and recreation, the last subject area from the plan. Our recommendations there were that we continue the development of trails in the village, which we've done a good job of. But we also said we should plan for future bike paths. Biking trails was an amenity that the marketing study that I talked about a little while ago said that future retirees are looking for places where there are bike trails. And we don't really have good places to ride your bike here in Tellico Village. And we kind of also then said, well, let's connect that with the fact that we have the CCI property. That might be a place where we could put bike trails, and particularly some of that is waterfront property that probably isn't big enough for homes and things like that. So could some of that property become a future bike paths along the waterfront, those kinds of things. And then the last recommendation for Parks and Recreation was to consider a strategic repurposing of the Chota Center. So Chota Center today is kind of a multi-purpose, multi-use building. I kind of joke it has an identity crisis. You know, it's meeting rooms, it's a gymnasium, it's a pool, it's a lot of different things, right? And that building is getting old enough that we're going to begin to need to invest money in the building to maintain it. And so we should probably step back and say, what is it we need that building to do for us? Do we have the right set of stuff there? And in the future, what's the right strategic role for the Chota Center? So those are the 17 new recommendations.
Just a few.
Just a few.
And I'm struck by the fact, Phil, that your committee, looking at the infrastructure, looking at amenities, looking at the social fabric, looking at Chota, which was the original wellness center before we have this beautiful new place that we have now. That is quite a list, and it's an amazing task that your group has done. So what now? Where do you go from here?
Good question. And I think it's really important to remember a couple of things. First of all, this plan continues to have a planning horizon of 20 years. So it would be unrealistic to think that all of this is going to happen overnight. And it would also be unrealistic not to realize that other factors may come along and change our plans. So while these are recommendations, some may or may not come to pass. as an advisory committee, we make recommendations. We don't take concrete actions, right? Each of these ideas needs to be incorporated into our 10-year budget planning cycle. None of this happens without money, so you got to plan for it. Several of these things would require further investigation, cost justification, and so forth. And some of them, we just may say, that's going to be too difficult, or it's going to cost too much, or there are more important priorities, and that's going to fall to the bottom of the list. So I think we just need to set our expectations that just because there is a recommendation, it certainly doesn't mean it's going to happen tomorrow. It might not ever happen for any number of reasons. Ultimately, the advice that we give, along with all of the other advisory committees, we're providing input to the POA staff and to the board of directors. The board of directors, has the budgeting authority, and at the end of the day, what happens, the priorities, and what time frame is the jurisdiction of the board of directors.
That's very good information. And I also just want to say that what I'm hearing throughout all of this is it's our recommendation. We've looked at this, here's what we're thinking. And I think it's important that our viewers realize there have been no decisions made.
Right.
And we are very much in the planning and looking at stage.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the other questions that they're going to ask, and I will probably see it many times on Nextdoor, where can they get a copy of your current plan and recommendations?
Sure. So everybody can get a copy of the plan. So on Tellico Life, in the top navigation, there's a POA section, and if you go to that section, the Long Range Planning Advisory Committee has a page on Tellico Life, and all the public documents that we do, our PowerPoint presentations, our plans, our survey results, our focus group results, all of those things are posted and are available for downloading off of Tellico Life.
And how can our viewers get, or just villagers in general, get more information about your particular committee, what you do and how you do it?
The Long Range Planning Advisory Committee has public meetings quarterly. This year, those meetings are in January, April, July, and October. And in fact, all of the advisory committees hold public meetings on a regular basis, and villagers are free to attend those meetings, learn, ask questions, provide feedback to any of the areas that those advisory committees, are overseeing.
And some of the onus is on us as residents to, kind of look into some of those places where you're telling us where we can get more information. This has really been an important topic today, and talking about not only the accomplishments that have been made since 2019, but also the updates that you're planning. And you've also mentioned that master land use plan, and I know that your team is working diligently on that. Will you come back and tell us about that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to come back, or maybe have some other members of the committee come and talk about that.
I think that would be great to have a big update on what the land use plan. We see a lot of questions out there in the community, and folks are wondering, what are we going to do with that now that we've made the purchase? And it's going to be exciting, and we'll all want to hear more about that. So we will look forward to having you back. Do you have anything else that you'd like to share with us before we close?
Yeah, so I do have a final thought here, and that is that the village runs on volunteerism. I touched on social fabric a little earlier. That is so important to the content and the character of the village, I think. We have 9 advisory committees in total that provide advice and recommendations to the staff and to the board of directors. Those advisory committees usually have about 7 members, so that's over 60 volunteer residents who are frequently meeting once or twice a month and providing input to the staff and to our 7-member board of directors, and together help steer the village. We have some really smart, talented, accomplished people in the village, and it's their contributions really that help make Tellico Village what it is. So what I would say, Annette, is I'd invite all of our viewers to just get involved. Go to the committee meetings, go to the board meetings, volunteer to be on one of the committees, run for the board if you'd like to do that. It's our work collectively that helps make Tellico Village the place that we all have learned to love.
Absolutely. And we are the volunteer state.
Yeah.
And we are an amazing community of volunteerism. So thank you so much for being with us again today, and we'll look forward to the master land use plan getting discussed at the next time. Thanks so much, Phil. More information about all of the POA advisory committees and when they meet can be found on the members-only POA website under Governance. Thank you for watching Tellico Village Network, your lens on what's happening in and around Tellico Village.